Have you ever watched someone completely fall apart and had to choose between running away or stepping closer? Maybe you've seen it at a bar, a family gathering, or even at work. That moment when someone's pain becomes so overwhelming it spills out as rage, and everyone around them freezes in fear. What would you do? What have you done? I'm curious, especially if you're from California or anywhere near Los Angeles, because that's where this story begins. In a restaurant so expensive that most people save for months just to eat there once. And there's a man destroying it, table by table, while everyone watches in horror. Everyone except one waitress who sees past the violence to something else entirely. The sound of shattering glass cut through the elegant dining room like a gunshot. Hannah Park's head snapped up from the reservation book, her heart immediately hammering against her ribs. After 2 years of working at Moonlight Palace, she'd learned to read the restaurant's rhythm. The soft clink of crystal, the murmur of expensive conversations, the gentle contemporary Korean music floating through the space. This sound didn't belong. She was moving before her mind fully caught up, her server's instincts pushing her toward the private dining section. The other servers had frozen, their faces pale in the low lighting. Through the frosted glass partition, she could see movement. Violent, erratic movement. At 24, Hannah had learned to recognize danger. She'd spent the last 18 months hiding from it, running from it, looking over her shoulder every single day. The scar on her left wrist, hidden beneath her long-sleeve uniform, was a permanent reminder of what happened when she didn't see danger coming. So when she pushed through the partition and saw the scene unfolding in the private room, every survival instinct she developed screamed at her to turn around and walk away. A man stood in the center of the room, chest heaving, surrounded by overturned furniture and broken dishware. He was tall, probably close to 6 feet, with the kind of broad shoulders that came from serious gym time. His black hair was disheveled, his expensive white shirt untucked and stained with wine. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Dark, wild, absolutely devastated. He had another man by the collar, a middle-aged businessman who was stammering apologies in rapid Korean. The sound of her native language, twisted with fear, sent a chill down Hannah's spine. "You think my father won't find out?" The tall man's voice was rough, almost unrecognizable as human. "You think you can threaten him, and I'll just sit here and smile?" The businessman's eyes were wide with terror. "I didn't mean anything by it, Jean. It was just business talk, just conversation." Jean. Hannah filed the name away, her mind working even as her body stayed rooted near the entrance. She should get the manager. She should call security. She should definitely not be standing here watching this unfold. The other 3 men who'd been dining with them had pressed themselves against the far wall. One was on his phone, probably calling for help. The waitress who'd been serving them, a girl named Sophie, had fled entirely. Hannah could hear her crying in the service corridor. Jean shoved the businessman away with enough force to send him stumbling into the wall. Then he grabbed the nearest table and flipped it. The sound of shattering plates joined the chaos, and Hannah flinched. The movement caught Jin's attention. His head turned toward her, and for a moment, their eyes met across the destroyed room. His were the darkest brown she'd ever seen, almost black in the low light, with flecks of amber that caught the restaurant's soft glow. Beautiful eyes, she thought distantly. Absolutely beautiful and completely lost. "Get out," he said, his voice dropping to something more dangerous than a shout. His English was perfect, barely accented. Just get out. Hannah knew she should listen. Every rational part of her brain was screaming at her to back away slowly and let someone else handle this. Someone bigger, someone stronger, someone who wasn't a single mother with a 4-year-old daughter waiting at home with a babysitter she could barely afford. But she'd seen that look before. That particular combination of rage and pain and desperation. She'd seen it in the mirror during the worst days with Tyler, when her ex had pushed her so far that something inside her had simply broken. She recognized it. And beneath the fear, beneath the self-preservation, something in her chest ached for this stranger who was clearly drowning. The manager burst through the partition behind her, his face red with exertion and stress. "Mr. Huang, please, we need you to calm down. We've called your father's people. They're on their way." "My father's people," Jean repeated and laughed. The sound was sharp and broken. "Of course you called them. Can't have the crazy son causing problems for business, can we?" He picked up a chair and Hannah saw the exact moment He was going to throw it through the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked Koreatown. The window that would cost thousands to replace. The window that would definitely get someone fired. Probably her, since she had the least seniority. Her body moved before her mind approved the decision. She stepped forward, not toward the exit, but toward Jean. The manager made a startled sound behind her. Mississippi Park, don't. But Hannah was already speaking, her voice quiet and steady despite the way her hands trembled. In Korean, she said, "You don't want to do that." Jin's hands tightened on the chair, his knuckles white. The muscles in his arms were corded with tension, his entire body vibrating with barely contained violence. "Get away from me." Hannah took another step closer. The broken glass crunched under her sensible work shoes. She could smell alcohol, expensive cologne, and beneath it all, the sharp tang of fear. His fear, she realized. Not anger at all, but terror that he was trying to cover with rage. "That window is really expensive," she continued in Korean, keeping her voice soft and conversational, like they were discussing the weather and not the wreckage surrounding them. "And I really need this job. I have a daughter at home, and she needs new shoes because 4-year-olds grow so fast, and the babysitter already thinks I'm unreliable because I work such late shifts." "What are you doing?" Jin's voice had shifted, confusion bleeding into the fury. "Why aren't you running?" "Because running doesn't actually help anything," Hannah said. She was close enough now to see the tears he was fighting back, the way his jaw clenched so hard it had to hurt. "Because you look like you're about to break that chair, and then you're going to feel worse than you already do. And because my daughter, Mia, she asks me every night if I helped anyone today, if I made someone's day better. And I don't know, maybe this counts." The chair in Jin's hands was shaking. His whole body was shaking. "You should be afraid of me." "I am afraid," Hannah admitted. She'd never been good at lying. Her ex used to hate that about her, how her feelings showed on her face no matter how hard she tried to hide them. "But I'm also tired of being afraid all the time. And you look more scared than I am." Something in Jin's face crumpled. The rage drained out of him so suddenly it was like watching a marionette's strings get cut. The chair slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. He staggered backward, one hand coming up to cover his face as his breathing came faster and faster. Hannah recognized a panic attack when she saw one. She'd had enough of her own. "Hey," she said, moving closer still, ignoring the manager's horrified gasp behind her. "Hey, it's okay. You're okay. Can you hear me?" Jean nodded jerkily, his hand still over his face. She could see his chest heaving, could hear the way his breath whistled through his teeth as he fought for control. "I need you to breathe with me," Hannah said, the same way she talked to Mia during nightmares. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that?" She demonstrated, making her own breathing loud and obvious. After a moment, Jean tried to match her rhythm. It took several attempts, his breath hitching and catching, but gradually the panic seemed to ease. His hand dropped from his face, revealing red-rimmed eyes and tear tracks on his cheeks. He looked younger like this, vulnerable. Probably not much older than her, maybe 28 or 29. Handsome in a way that made her stomach flip despite the circumstances, with sharp cheekbones and a mouth that probably smiled easily when it wasn't twisted with anguish. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and it sounded like the words were being torn from him. "I'm so sorry." The sound of multiple footsteps in the corridor made them both turn. A group of men in dark suits entered the private room, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of training. But it was the man at their center who commanded attention. He was probably in his late 50s, not as tall as Jean, but carrying himself with absolute authority. His silver-streaked hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit immaculate. His face was hard, all sharp angles and stern lines, but his eyes softened when they landed on Jean. "Adul," the man said. "Son." The single word carried such weight that Hannah felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Jin's entire body went rigid. "Abioji." "Father." "I didn't mean to. I just—" He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. The older man, who Hannah assumed was Jin's father and presumably the Huang that the manager had mentioned, surveyed the damage with an expression that revealed nothing. Then his gaze shifted to Hannah, assessing her with the kind of thorough attention that made her feel exposed. "And who is this young woman standing so close to my son?" His English was more accented than Jin's, but equally fluent. "She works here," Jean said, his voice rough and exhausted. He paused, seemed to struggle for words. She helped me. Helped you, Mr. Huang repeated, his tone suggesting this was an unusual concept. He looked at Hannah more carefully, taking in her simple black uniform, her sensible ponytail, the way she was still standing closer to Jean than safety would recommend. What is your name? Hannah Park, she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. She had the feeling that showing weakness in front of this man would be a mistake. I'm a server here. Mississippi Park, the manager cut in from behind her, his voice high with stress. I apologize for any disturbance. Mr. Huang, we will of course compensate you for any inconvenience. You will do no such thing, Mr. Huang said without looking at the manager. His eyes stayed on Hannah. My son destroyed your establishment. I will compensate you. He pulled out a wallet and extracted what looked like several credit cards. Whatever the damage is, plus 100,000 for the disruption to your business and your patrons' experience. The manager made a strangled sound that might have been gratitude or shock. Hannah couldn't tell which. Mr. Huang gestured to his men, who moved forward to flank Jean. Gently, almost tenderly, they guided him toward the exit. Jean went without resistance, his gaze dropping to the floor. But just before he disappeared through the partition, he looked back at Hannah. Thank you, he mouthed. Then he was gone, and Hannah was left standing in the wreckage, her heart pounding and her hands finally starting to shake with delayed adrenaline. The rest of the night passed in a blur. The restaurant closed early while staff cleaned up the damage. The manager questioned her repeatedly about what had happened, his tone suggesting he couldn't quite believe she'd approached an actively violent customer. The other servers gave her wide berth, looking at her like she'd done something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Hannah wasn't sure which one was true. She made it home at almost 2 in the morning, letting herself into the tiny studio apartment she shared with Mia in a not great part of Koreatown. The babysitter, Mrs. Chun from next door, was asleep on the futon couch, and Mia was curled up in their shared bed, her dark hair spread across the pillow. Hannah paid Mrs. Chun, locked the door behind her, and engaged both deadbolts plus the chain lock. The routine was automatic now, had been for 18 months. Check the windows. Check the closet. Check under the bed. Make sure Tyler hadn't somehow found them. Only then did she let herself exhale. She showered quickly, washing away the smell of expensive food and broken glass, then slipped into bed beside her daughter. Mia made a small sound and curled closer, her small warm body automatically seeking comfort even in sleep. This was what mattered, Hannah reminded herself. This was why she worked double shifts at a restaurant where one meal cost more than her weekly grocery budget. This was why she'd left everything behind and started over with nothing but a suitcase and her baby girl. Safety. Security. A future where Mia never had to be afraid of her own father the way Hannah had been afraid of Tyler. She was almost asleep when her phone buzzed on the milk crate nightstand. Probably the manager with more questions about tonight. But when she checked, it was an unknown number. The text was simple and formal. Mississippi Park, this is Daesung Huang. I would like to speak with you tomorrow regarding a business proposition. Please call this number at your earliest convenience. The compensation will be significant. Hannah stared at the message for a long time, her stomach twisting with anxiety and something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. She should delete it. Should block the number and pretend tonight had never happened. Should stay as far away as possible from whatever world Jean Huang and his father inhabited. But she'd seen her bank balance this morning. She had $43 until Friday's paycheck, and her rent was due in 2 weeks. Mrs. Chun had mentioned she might not be able to babysit as much anymore. And Tyler had been active on social media lately, posting about Los Angeles, about how he was going to find his family no matter what. So instead of deleting the message, Hannah saved the number. Then she closed her eyes, held her daughter close, and tried not to think about the beautiful broken man she'd seen tonight. Try not to wonder what kind of pain could make someone come apart so completely in public. Try not to remember the way he'd looked at her with those devastated dark eyes and whispered thank you like she'd saved his life instead of just his restaurant window. Tried and failed on all counts. Tomorrow, she would call Daesung Huang. Tomorrow, she would find out what kind of business proposition was worth reaching out to a random waitress in the middle of the night. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, she held her daughter and pretended they were safe, and tried not to notice the way her heart was still racing hours after Jean Huang had walked away. Hannah called Daesung Huang at 9 in the morning, after she'd dropped Mia at the small private preschool she could barely afford. Her hands trembled as she dialed, and she almost hung up twice before someone answered. A professional female voice greeted her in Korean. "Mr. Huang has been expecting your call, Mississippi Park. Please hold." The wait was less than 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then Daesung Huang's voice came through, calm and authoritative. "Mississippi Park, thank you for calling. I would like to meet with you this morning to discuss an opportunity. I can send a car to your location in 1 hour." "I work today," Hannah said, then immediately felt foolish. Of course he would know her schedule. Men like Daesung Huang seem to know everything. "I have already spoken with your manager. You have been given a paid leave of absence for the next 2 weeks while you consider my proposal. The car will arrive at 10:30. He hung up before she could respond. Hannah stared at her phone, her heart racing. She should be angry at his presumption, at the way he'd simply arranged her life without asking. But underneath the anxiety was a current of relief so strong it almost brought tears to her eyes. 2 weeks of paid leave meant 2 weeks of rent money guaranteed. 2 weeks where she didn't have to smile at entitled customers or pretend her feet didn't ache. 2 weeks to figure out what to do about Tyler. Because Tyler had been at her apartment building yesterday. She'd seen him from Mrs. Chen's window, talking to the building manager, showing him something on his phone. Probably a picture of her and Mia. The building manager had shaken his head, but Tyler hadn't looked convinced. He'd stood on the sidewalk for almost an hour, just watching. Hannah had stayed hidden in Mrs. Chen's apartment until he finally left. The black car arrived exactly at 10:30. The driver was professionally polite, opening the door for her without comment. The interior smelled like leather and money. Hannah smoothed down her simple cotton dress and tried not to feel completely out of place. They drove to a high-rise building in downtown Los Angeles, all glass and steel and importance. Mr. Huang's office occupied the entire top floor. The view was spectacular, the city sprawling out in every direction, but Hannah could barely focus on it. Daesung Huang sat behind a massive desk, but he stood when she entered, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from him. His suit today was navy blue, perfectly tailored, and he wore a watch that probably cost more than Hannah made in a year. "Thank you for coming, Mississippi Park. Please sit." Hannah sat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. "I will be direct," Mr. Huang said. "My son is suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. He served in the South Korean military, mandatory service, and witnessed things that no person should see. Since returning 3 years ago, he has struggled. Therapy has helped somewhat, but he still has episodes like the one you witnessed." "I'm sorry," Hannah said quietly. "That must be very difficult for him. And for you." Mr. Huang's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "It is. But last night, you did something no one else has been able to do. You calmed him. You reached him when he was completely lost to his pain. His therapist says that human connection, genuine compassion, is often more effective than any medication." He leaned forward slightly. "I would like to hire you to be Jin's companion, to live at his residence, to spend time with him, to help him manage his symptoms. You would be compensated $10,000 per week." Hannah's breath caught. $10,000. That was more than she made in 3 months at the restaurant. "I have a daughter," she managed to say. "I know. She would come with you, of course. Jin's residence has plenty of space, and there is an excellent private school nearby that she would attend at my expense. You would both be completely safe and cared for." Safe. The word seemed to glow in the air between them. "Why me?" Hannah asked. "You could hire a professional caregiver, someone with training." "Because my son doesn't respond to professionals. He sees them as his father's way of managing him, of keeping him controlled. But you, Mississippi Park, you weren't trying to control him. You simply saw his pain and responded with kindness. He needs that. He needs someone who sees him as human, not as a problem to solve." Hannah thought about her tiny studio apartment, about Tyler lurking outside, about the fear that never quite left her no matter how many locks she engaged. She thought about Mia's worn shoes and the way her daughter sometimes asked why they couldn't have a bigger space to play in. When would this start? She heard herself ask. "Today, if you're willing. I can have your belongings moved this afternoon." It was too fast, too sudden, too good to be true. Every instinct told her to be careful, to think it through, to not trust powerful men with easy solutions. But then she thought about Tyler's face outside her building, about the way he'd looked so determined, so certain he would find them eventually. "I'll do it," Hannah said, "but I need to pick up my daughter from school myself. And I need your word that we can leave if it doesn't work out." "You have my word," Mr. Huang said. "And Mississippi Park? Thank you. You may very well be saving my son's life." By that evening, Hannah and Mia were driving up the Pacific Coast Highway toward Malibu, following the same black car that had picked her up that morning. Mia was bouncing excitedly in her car seat, thrilled by the adventure of it all, completely unaware of the danger they were running from. The Huang family compound was hidden behind high walls and sophisticated gates. The driver punched in a code and the gates swung open, revealing a sprawling property that took Hannah's breath away. There were several buildings, all modern and expensive, arranged around beautifully landscaped grounds. But they drove past the main house, following a private road to a separate residence that sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was smaller than the main house, but still enormous by Hannah's standards. All clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the endless view of the Pacific. "This is where Mr. Gene lives," the driver said. "He prefers his privacy." Hannah's stomach churned with nervousness as they pulled up to the front entrance. What if Gene didn't want them here? What if he resented his father's interference? The door opened before she could knock, and there he was. Gene looked different in the fading daylight. Calmer, more composed, though she could see the tension in his shoulders and the wariness in his dark eyes. He wore simple clothes, jeans, and a black t-shirt, and his hair was still damp like he'd recently showered. "So he actually did it," Gene said, his voice flat. "Sent you here like a prescription." Hannah felt Mia press against her leg, suddenly shy in the face of this tall, intimidating stranger. She put a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Your father made me an offer," Hannah said, keeping her voice steady. "I accepted. But if you don't want us here, we'll leave right now. I'm not here to make you uncomfortable." Jin's gaze dropped to Mia, and something in his expression shifted. The little girl was peeking out from behind Hannah's legs, her dark eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. "How old?" Jean asked. "4," Hannah said. "Her name is Mia." Gene was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped back from the doorway. "You're already here. Might as well come in." The interior of the house was beautiful and surprisingly warm. The furniture was modern but comfortable, and there were personal touches everywhere that made it feel like an actual home rather than a showplace. Books stacked on tables, a guitar leaning against the wall, photographs of Gene with his family scattered throughout. Mr. Huang's assistant had arranged everything. Their belongings, meager as they were, had already been moved into a spacious guest suite with its own bathroom and a smaller room attached that would be perfect for Mia. The view from the windows was spectacular, ocean stretching to the horizon. Mia immediately ran to the window, pressing her small hands against the glass. "Mama, look. It's so big. That's the Pacific Ocean," Gene said from the doorway. His voice had lost some of its hostile edge. "Have you been to the beach before?" "Once," Mia said, turning to look at him with typical 4-year-old directness. "But we couldn't stay long because Mama had to work." "Are you the man who lives here?" "I am," Gene said. "Do you like it?" "Sometimes," Gene said, and Hannah heard the honesty in his answer. "It's very quiet." "I can be quiet," Mia announced solemnly. "Mama says I'm good at being quiet when I need to be." Hannah's throat tightened. Mia had learned to be quiet during the worst days with Tyler, when any noise might set him off. Her daughter shouldn't have to know how to make herself small and silent, but she did. Gene seemed to sense something in the moment because his expression softened further. "You don't have to be quiet here. There's a pond out back with koi fish, if you want to see them." "Really?" Mia's eyes lit up. "Can I, Mama? Please?" Hannah nodded, and Mia grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the door. Gene followed, maintaining a careful distance, but Hannah caught the way he watched them with something like longing. The koi pond was stunning, built into the landscaping with smooth stones and water plants. The fish were large and colorful, gliding through the clear water like living jewels. Mia was immediately enchanted, kneeling at the edge to watch them swim. "They're beautiful," Hannah said softly to Gene. "Do you take care of them yourself?" "Yes. It's peaceful. Gives me something to focus on." They stood in silence for a while, watching Mia watch the fish. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost unreal in their beauty. "I'm sorry about last night," Jean said abruptly. "You shouldn't have had to see that. Shouldn't have had to deal with me when I was like that." "You were in pain," Hannah said. "I've been there. Maybe not exactly the same, but I understand what it's like when everything becomes too much." Jean looked at her then, really looked at her, and Hannah felt exposed under his scrutiny. "What are you running from?" The question was so direct it took her breath away. "How did you know?" "Because you flinch at sudden sounds. Because you check the locks twice. Because your daughter knows how to be too quiet." He paused. "Because it takes one to know one." Hannah's heart was pounding. "My ex-Mia's father. He was violent. We left, started over, but he's been looking for us." "Does my father know?" "I don't know what he knows," Hannah admitted. "But that's part of why I said yes. I need somewhere Tyler can't find us." Jean nodded slowly. "Then you're safe here. No one gets through those gates without my father's permission, and trust me, he doesn't give it lightly." "Thank you," Hannah said. They stood together in the gathering dusk, two broken people trying to figure out how to exist in the same space. It wasn't comfortable, not yet, but it wasn't hostile either. It was something else. Something fragile and uncertain, but not without hope. Mia yawned hugely, and Hannah realized how late it had gotten. She scooped her daughter up, feeling the familiar weight settle against her shoulder. "I should get her to bed," Hannah said. Jean led them back inside, showing them how the security system worked, where everything was, maintaining that careful distance. But when Hannah had gotten Mia settled and came back out to the living room, she found Jean standing at the windows, staring out at the dark ocean. He looked so alone it made her chest ache. She should go back to her room, give him space. But something made her walk over to stand beside him. "Thank you for letting us stay," she said quietly. "I didn't really have a choice," Jean said, but there was no heat in it. "My father gets what he wants. Still, it's your home. I know this must be strange for you." Jean turned to look at her, and in the reflection of the window glass, she saw how tired he looked. How young and old at the same time. "It is strange," he admitted, "but maybe not bad strange." The moment stretched between them, fragile and tentative. Then Jean stepped back, breaking the spell. "I usually have nightmares," he said abruptly. "If you hear me, just ignore it. I'll be fine." Before Hannah could respond, he walked away, disappearing down the hall to what she assumed was his bedroom. She stood alone in the living room for a while, listening to the sound of the ocean through the partially open window, feeling the weight of all the unknowns pressing down on her. Then she went back to the guest suite, checked on Mia one more time, and tried to sleep. She woke to the sound of screaming. For a confused moment, she thought Tyler had found them, that he was in the house, that they had to run. But then she remembered where they were, and realized the screaming was coming from down the hall. "Jean." Hannah's body moved before her mind caught up, the same instinct that had made her approach him in the restaurant overriding her common sense. She padded barefoot down the hall, following the sound to Jin's room. His door was ajar. Through the gap, she could see him thrashing on the bed, tangled in sheets, his face contorted with terror even in sleep. She should wake him, or get help, or do literally anything except walk into a strange man's bedroom in the middle of the night. But she'd seen this before too. The nightmares that felt more real than reality. The way the past could reach forward and drag you back no matter how far you ran. Hannah pushed the door open and approached the bed carefully. "Jean," she said softly. "Jean, it's okay. You're safe. You're home." He didn't wake, but his thrashing intensified. She could hear him muttering in Korean, fragments of sentences that made her heart break. "Please, I couldn't save them. There was so much blood." She sat on the edge of the bed, the same way she did with Mia during nightmares. "Jean," she said again, a little louder. "It's Hannah. You're not there anymore. Whatever you're seeing, it's not real. You're in Malibu. You're safe." She reached out and touched his shoulder gently, ready to pull back if he reacted violently. Jin's eyes snapped open. For a moment, he stared at her without recognition, his breathing ragged and panicked. Then awareness flooded back and his entire body went rigid. "I told you to ignore it," he said, his voice rough. "I can't," Hannah said simply. "I know what nightmares feel like. I wouldn't want to face them alone." Jean sat up slowly, running a shaking hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Hannah said. "I know you're hurting. I know you're trying. That's enough." They sat in the darkness of his room, the ocean a constant murmur through the windows. Slowly, Jin's breathing evened out. The panic receded from his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered finally. Hannah stood to leave, but Jin's voice stopped her. "Would you? Could you just stay for a minute? Just until I can fall back asleep?" She should say no, should maintain appropriate boundaries. But she heard the vulnerability in his question, the same vulnerability she felt every night when she checked the locks and prayed Tyler wouldn't find them. So she sat back down, leaning against the headboard beside him. Jean settled back against the pillows, maintaining a careful distance, but she could feel the warmth of him beside her in the darkness. "Tell me about Mia," he said quietly. "What's she like?" So Hannah talked, her voice soft in the darkness, telling him about her daughter's love of drawing, her fearless curiosity, the way she asked a million questions about everything. And somewhere in the middle of a story about Mia's obsession with butterflies, she felt Jin's breathing shift into the deeper rhythm of sleep. She stayed a while longer, just to be sure. Then she carefully extracted herself and returned to her own room, her heart beating strangely in her chest. This was dangerous, she told herself. Getting attached to Jin, seeing his vulnerability, feeling this pull toward him. She was here to help him heal, nothing more. She needed to maintain distance, stay professional, remember that this was temporary. But as she climbed back into bed and listened to the sound of the ocean, she couldn't quite convince herself that distance was possible anymore. Not when she'd seen the gratitude in his eyes. Not when his presence made her feel safer than she had in years. Not when, for the first time since leaving Tyler, she'd gone to sleep without checking the locks compulsively. Because somehow, impossibly, she believed Jin when he said she was safe here. And that terrified her almost as much as it comforted her. The first 2 weeks at Jin's house developed a rhythm that surprised Hannah with its easiness. She woke early, before the sun fully rose over the Pacific, and made her way to the kitchen. The space was professional grade, all gleaming stainless steel and marble counters, far nicer than anything she'd ever cooked in. But it felt good to move through it, to prepare the kinds of foods her own mother had made when Hannah was small. Mayakuk, seaweed soup with tender beef. Jairanmari, rolled eggs with vegetables tucked inside. Fresh rice in the expensive rice cooker. Kimchi from the well-stocked refrigerator that Jin's housekeeper kept filled. Simple foods, comfort foods, the kind that said home even when home was complicated. Jin appeared around 7 most mornings, drawn by the smells. He never said much at first, just poured coffee and sat at the kitchen island while she cooked. But Hannah noticed things. The way his shoulders gradually relaxed as he breathed in the familiar scents. The way his hands steadied around the coffee mug. The way he watched her move through the space with an expression she couldn't quite read. "My mother used to make this," he said one morning, gesturing to the mayakuk. Before everything got complicated, Hannah ladled soup into bowls, placed one in front of him. "What was she like?" "Your mother?" "Kind," Jin said. "Too kind for the life she married into. She tried to keep me and my sister separate from my father's business, but you can't really separate yourself from that world. It touches everything." Mia would join them eventually, padding into the kitchen in her pajamas, her hair wild from sleep. She learned quickly that Jin didn't mind her chatter, and she'd fill the morning silence with observations about the fish or questions about the ocean or elaborate plans for the day's adventures. Jin taught Mia how to feed the koi fish, showing her the proper way to scatter the food so all of them got their share. He was patient with her endless questions, more patient than Hannah had expected. Sometimes she would watch them together by the pond. Jin crouched down to Mia's height while he explained something, and her chest would ache with a feeling she didn't want to examine too closely. Afternoons, Jin worked out in the home gym, while Hannah helped Mia with the preschool activities from her new school. Evenings, they cooked dinner together, or ordered in and ate on the deck overlooking the ocean. Jin was calmer in these moments, the worst of his tension eased by routine and company. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. And each time, Hannah went to him, sat beside him in the darkness until his breathing evened out. They didn't talk about it during the day. It was just something they did, like sharing breakfast or watching the sunset together had become something they did. Hannah felt herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in years. She stopped checking over her shoulder constantly. She stopped jumping at every unexpected sound. The tight knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest since leaving Tyler began, very slowly, to loosen. She should have known it couldn't last. It was the 13th night when everything shifted. Mia had been asleep for hours, and Hannah was sitting on the deck with a cup of tea, watching the moonlight on the water. She'd thought Gene had gone to bed, but he appeared in the doorway, hesitating. "Can I join you?" he asked. "Of course," Hannah said, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself against the cool ocean breeze. Gene sat in the chair beside hers, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but not touching. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of comfortable quiet they'd developed over the past 2 weeks. Then Gene said, "You never told me the whole story. About your ex. About why you're really here." Hannah's fingers tightened on her tea mug. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me," Gene said. His voice was gentle, without pressure. "You've been listening to my demons every night. Seems fair that I listen to yours." Hannah took a breath. The ocean murmured in the darkness, constant and soothing. Maybe that's why she found herself talking, telling him things she'd never told anyone except the police and the woman at the domestic violence shelter who'd helped her escape. "Tyler was charming when we met," she said. "Funny, attentive, everything I thought I wanted. We got serious fast, too fast probably. I got pregnant with Mia, and we moved in together. For a while, it was good." She paused, took a sip of tea that had gone lukewarm. "Then he lost his job. He started drinking more, getting angry over little things. The first time he hit me, he cried after. Swore it would never happen again. Begged me to forgive him." Jin's hands had formed fists on the armrests of his chair, but he stayed quiet, letting her continue. "But it did happen again. And again. It got worse after Mia was born. He'd wake her up with his yelling, and when she cried, he'd get angrier. I started taking extra shifts, anything to keep us away from the apartment when he was there. I told myself I was waiting for the right time to leave, that I needed to save more money, that I had to plan it perfectly." "What changed?" Gene asked, his voice rough. "He grabbed Mia," Hannah said. "She was 3. She'd spilled juice on his laptop, and he just snatched her up, started shaking her. I saw his hand raise and I knew, I absolutely knew, that if he hit my baby I would kill him or he would kill me trying." Her hands were shaking now. Gene reached over and gently took the mug from her before she could drop it. "I fought him," Hannah continued. "Got Mia away from him. He came at me, and I grabbed the first thing I could reach, a lamp, and hit him with it. He went down, and I just grabbed Mia and ran. We didn't take anything except what we were wearing. I drove to a shelter I'd looked up weeks before, the one I'd been too afraid to actually contact." She looked down at her wrist, at the thin scar barely visible in the moonlight. "He caught my arm when we were running out. Pulled so hard, he dislocated my elbow. I had to pop it back in myself in the car because I was too afraid to stop." Gene made a sound, something between a growl and a groan. "If I ever meet him," he said, his voice dark with promise. "If I ever see him near you or Mia." "I know," Hannah said quietly. "But Gene, that's not who you need to be. Not for me." He looked at her then, his dark eyes intense in the moonlight. "What do you see when you look at me, Hannah? Everyone else sees my father's son. They see the violence, the rage, the broken parts. What do you see?" Hannah reached over and took his hand, feeling how tense it was, how he was fighting for control. "I see someone who feeds koi fish every morning," she said. "Someone who is patient with a 4-year-old's endless questions. Someone who makes his bed every day even when he's struggling. Someone who says thank you when I bring him tea. Someone who's trying so hard to be better than what the world expects of him." Jin's thumb moved across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. "Tell me your story," she said. "The real one, not the version your father would tell." Gene was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then he started talking, his voice low and careful, like he was feeling his way through a minefield. "I was supposed to go into the family business," he said, "but my mother convinced my father to let me have a few years of normal life first. So I went to university in Seoul, studied business, pretended I was just a regular student. Then mandatory military service came." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I was placed in a unit near the DMZ, demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. You hear about the tensions, but you don't understand what it's like until you're there. The constant surveillance, the knowledge that at any moment things could explode. We had an incident, an incursion across the border." His hand had gone rigid in hers. "There were civilians," Gene said. "A family who'd gotten caught in the wrong place. I tried to get to them, to help, but..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "There was so much gunfire. By the time it stopped, they were dead. All of them, including 2 children. "Oh, Jean," Hannah whispered. "I couldn't save them," Jean continued. "I couldn't do anything. And then I came home, and my father put me to work in the real family business. Not the legitimate imports and exports, but the other things. The violence, the threats, the whole infrastructure of fear his organization runs on. He thought it would toughen me up, help me forget. Did it work?" "No," Jean said flatly. "It just added new nightmares to the old ones. I started having panic attacks, episodes like the one you saw at the restaurant. My father finally sent me to therapy, but I couldn't talk to the therapist honestly. How do I explain that I'm drowning in violence and I can't escape it because violence is my inheritance?" "You're not your father," Hannah said firmly. "You're not the things you've seen or been forced to do. You're the person who chooses to be gentle when you could choose otherwise." Jean turned to look at her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart race. "How are you real?" he asked, his voice almost wondering. "How are you sitting here, knowing what you know about me and my world, and still looking at me like I'm worth saving?" "Because you are," Hannah said. "Because I understand what it's like to feel trapped by circumstances. Because you've given Mia and me safety when we desperately needed it. Because when you could have turned us away, you let us stay." Jean raised his free hand, hesitating before cupping her cheek. His palm was warm against her skin, slightly rough, and Hannah found herself leaning into the touch. "Hannah," he said, and her name had never sounded like that before. Like a prayer, like a question, like a plea. "Yes," she whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was agreeing to. Jean leaned closer, giving her every chance to pull away, his eyes searching hers for permission. When she didn't move, didn't retreat, he closed the final distance and kissed her. It was soft, tentative, nothing like the demanding kisses Tyler had given her. Jean kissed like he was afraid she might break, like she was precious and fragile and worth cherishing. His hand trembled slightly against her cheek, and Hannah realized he was just as nervous as she was. She kissed him back, letting her free hand come up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat hammering beneath her palm. The kiss deepened gradually, naturally, Jin's other hand coming up to tangle gently in her hair. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Jean rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me this is okay," he said. "Tell me I'm not taking advantage." "You're not," Hannah assured him. "I want this. I want you." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning and possibility and risk. Because this changed things. This made their situation complicated in ways that went beyond a simple business arrangement. Jean kissed her again, longer this time, and Hannah felt something in her chest unfurl. Something that had been locked tight for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like. Hope. Trust. The beginning of something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. They stayed on the deck until the cold drove them inside, hands linked, neither quite willing to let go. At the door to her room, Jean kissed her once more, soft and sweet. "Good night, Hannah," he said. "Good night," she replied, and meant it in a way she never had before. She was still floating on that feeling when Daesung Hwang arrived the next afternoon. Hannah was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard the front door open. Jin's father walked in with 2 of his men, his expression grave. Jean emerged from his home office, tension immediately visible in his shoulders. "Abioji," Jean said. "I wasn't expecting you." "We need to talk," Mr. Hwang said. Then his eyes found Hannah. "Mississippi Park, would you mind giving us privacy?" Hannah started to retreat, but Jin's hand shot out, catching her wrist gently. "She can stay. Whatever you need to say, she can hear." Mr. Hwang studied them for a moment, and Hannah wondered if he could see what had changed between them, if it was written on their faces. "Very well," he said finally. "The Nakamoto Syndicate has been making moves. They know you've been isolated here, Jean. They think you're a weakness they can exploit to get to me." "I'm not weak," Jean said, his voice hard. "I know that. But they don't. They see the son who had a breakdown in public, who's been in hiding at his beach house for months. They think if they can get to you, they can hurt me." "Let them try," Jean said. "It's not just about you anymore," Mr. Hwang said, his gaze flickering to Hannah. "You have people here who matter to you. People who could be used against you." Hannah's blood ran cold. She'd escaped one dangerous man only to find herself potentially threatened by an entire organization. "I'm increasing security around the property," Mr. Hwang continued. "More men on the perimeter, better surveillance." No one gets in or out without my knowledge. Jean, I need you to be careful. No unnecessary risks. Understood, Jean said, but his hand had tightened on Hannah's wrist, protective. After Mr. Huang left, Jean turned to Hannah. I won't let anything happen to you or Mia, he said fiercely. You're safe here. I promise. But Hannah had heard promises before. She'd believed in safety before, only to have it shattered. Still, when Jean pulled her close, when she felt the solid strength of him and the absolute conviction in his voice, she wanted to believe. She wanted to believe so badly it scared her almost as much as the threat itself. Outside, through the windows, she could see additional security guards taking up positions around the property. The beautiful isolated sanctuary was becoming a fortress. And somewhere out there, both the Nakamoto syndicate and Tyler were circling, two different threats converging on the fragile piece she'd found. But Jin's arms were around her, and for now, for this moment, she let herself feel safe, even knowing how dangerous that feeling could be. The days after their first kiss fell into a new rhythm, one that hummed with awareness and possibility. Jean touched her more now, casual brushes of his hand against hers when they passed in the kitchen, his palm warm on her lower back when he guided her through a doorway, his fingers tucking a strand of hair behind her ear while she cooked. Hannah found herself watching him constantly, noticing details she'd overlooked before. The way his eyes crinkled when Mia made him laugh. The careful precision of his movements when he was trying to stay calm. The softness in his expression when he thought no one was watching. 3 weeks into their stay, Mia came home from her new school with a project assignment. She needed to create a family tree, complete with drawings and information about each family member. The teacher had been understanding about their situation, telling Mia she could include whoever she considered family. Mia spread her supplies across the dining table, her small face scrunched in concentration. Hannah sat beside her, helping organize the construction paper and markers, when Jean appeared with coffee for Hannah and apple juice for Mia. What are we working on? He asked, setting the drinks down. Family tree, Mia announced. But I don't know what to draw for some people. Jean pulled up a chair, genuinely interested. Tell me what you have so far. Mia pointed to her rough sketch. This is Mama at the top. And this is me. And I was going to put my daddy, but Mama says he's not safe, so I don't know if he counts as family. Hannah's chest tightened. They'd had this conversation several times, trying to explain Tyler's absence in terms a 4-year-old could understand without terrifying her. Jean was quiet for a moment, then said gently, Family isn't just about blood, Mia. It's about the people who take care of you and love you. So you could put anyone who does that. Like who? Mia asked, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. Well, like your mom, obviously. She takes care of you better than anyone. And what about Mrs. Chun? She used to babysit you, right? Mia nodded enthusiastically. She makes really good dumplings. Then she's family. And you could put my father, if you want. He's the one who made sure you could go to a good school. Really? I can put Mr. Huang. If you want, Jean said. Mia picked up a green marker and started drawing. What about you? She asked, not looking up from her paper. Are you family? Hannah's breath caught. She waited for Jean to deflect, to maintain the professional distance that their arrangement technically required. Instead, Jean reached out and tapped Mia's nose gently, making her giggle. I'd like to be, if that's okay with you. Yeah, Mia said, like it was the simplest decision in the world. You live with us and you're nice and you know about fish. That's family. Jin's eyes met Hannah's over Mia's bent head, and the emotion there made her throat tight. He looked vulnerable and hopeful and terrified all at once. For the next hour, Jean helped Mia with her project, suggesting ideas for decorations, helping her spell difficult words, telling her stories about his own mother and sisters so Mia could understand what extended family meant. He was patient and creative, and watching him with her daughter made Hannah's heart do dangerous things in her chest. Later, after Mia had gone to bed clutching her completed family tree with pride, Jean and Hannah stood together in the kitchen. She was washing dishes while he dried, a domestic routine that felt more intimate than it should. Thank you for being so good with her, Hannah said. You didn't have to spend your afternoon on a school project. I wanted to, Jean said. He set down the dish he was drying and turned to face her. Hannah, I need to tell you something. She turned off the water, anxiety spiking. What is it? My father wants me to bring you to a family dinner. At the main house. He says my mother wants to meet you, and my sister is curious. Hannah's stomach clenched. Meeting his family felt significant, like crossing a line from temporary arrangement to something real and permanent. You don't have to, Jean added quickly, reading her expression. I can tell them you're not comfortable. No, Hannah said. I'll go. When? This Saturday. He paused. They're going to scrutinize you. They're going to have opinions. My mother will probably ask uncomfortable questions, and my sister will definitely judge you. I just want you to be prepared. Are they going to think I'm taking advantage of you? Hannah asked. Or that I'm not good enough for someone in your family? Jean stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. They're going to see exactly what I see. Someone strong and brave and kind. Someone who's been through hell and came out still capable of compassion. Someone who makes me want to be better. He kissed her softly, and Hannah melted into it, her wet hands finding his shoulders. When they pulled apart, Jean rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling for you, Hannah. I need you to know that. This isn't just gratitude or convenience. I'm actually falling in love with you. The words should have terrified her. She'd known him less than a month. This whole situation was temporary, conditional, complicated by his father's money and her desperate circumstances. But standing in his kitchen with his hands gentle on her face and his heart in his eyes, all she felt was an answering pull in her own chest. I'm falling for you too, she whispered. Even though I know I shouldn't. Even though this is complicated. Jean smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Then we'll be complicated together. Saturday arrived too quickly. Hannah changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on a simple navy dress that was nice without being too formal. Jean assured her she looked perfect, but she could see the tension in his shoulders as they drove to the main house with Mia chattering excitedly in the back seat. The main Huang residence was even more impressive up close, all modern architecture and expensive landscaping. Mr. Huang greeted them at the door, his expression warmer than Hannah had seen before. Mississippi Park, welcome. Please, come in. Inside, the house was elegant but surprisingly comfortable. A woman appeared from the living room, and Hannah knew immediately this was Jin's mother. She had the same striking bone structure, the same dark eyes, though hers were filled with warmth rather than pain. You must be Hannah, she said in lightly accented English, coming forward with a smile. I am Soyao. It is so good to finally meet you. Jin has told us about you. Hannah bowed respectfully. Thank you for inviting us, Mrs. Huang. Please, call me Soyao. And this must be Mia. Mia, who'd been shy at first, perked up when Soyao knelt down to her level. I like your house, she said. It's really big. Thank you, Soyao said seriously. Would you like to see the garden? We have a fountain with goldfish. Really? Can I, Mama? Hannah nodded, and Soyao led Mia away, giving Hannah an unexpected moment to breathe. Jin's sister appeared next, a young woman in her early 20s with sharp eyes and designer clothes. So you're the mysterious waitress, she said, her tone neutral. I'm Yuna. Nice to meet you, Hannah said, keeping her voice steady. Yuna studied her for a long moment. My brother seems calmer. Happier. I haven't seen him like this since before his military service. I'm glad, Hannah said carefully. Don't hurt him, Yuna said bluntly. He acts tough, but he's fragile right now. If you're just here for the money, you should leave before he gets more attached. Yuna, Jean said sharply, moving to stand beside Hannah. That's enough. No, it's okay, Hannah said. She met Yuna's challenging gaze directly. You're right to be protective of him. If I had a brother, I'd probably say the same thing. But I'm not here for money. I'm here because being with Jean makes me feel safe for the first time in years. Because he's good with my daughter. Because when I look at him, I see someone worth caring about. Yuna's expression softened fractionally. Good. Just making sure you know he has people watching out for him. Dinner was both easier and harder than Hannah had expected. The food was spectacular, traditional Korean dishes that reminded her of her childhood. The conversation flowed naturally, with Soyoung asking gentle questions about Hannah's background and Mia entertaining everyone with her stories about school and the koi fish. But Hannah was also aware of being assessed, evaluated, judged by every person at the table. Mr. Huang's associates, the ones who'd been at the restaurant that night, were there too. They treated her with polite respect, but she could see them watching how Jean looked at her, how he touched her hand under the table, how he seemed lighter in her presence. Toward the end of the meal, Soyoung spoke to Hannah in Korean. My son has suffered greatly. I have prayed for something, someone, to help him find peace. When Daesung told me about you, I hoped. And now, seeing you together, I believe my prayers were answered. I don't know if I'm anyone's answer, Hannah said honestly, but I care about him. Very much. That is all I needed to hear, Soyoung said, squeezing her hand. They left the main house after dinner, Mia sleepy and content. Jean had arranged for her to have her first sleepover at a friend's house from school, a carefully vetted family that Mr. Huang's people had cleared. Hannah had been nervous about letting Mia out of her sight, but Jean assured her the family lived within the compound, completely safe. After they dropped Mia off, they drove back to Jin's house in comfortable silence. The evening had gone well, but Hannah felt wrung out from the emotional intensity of being evaluated by his entire family. You were amazing tonight, Jean said as they walked inside. My mother loves you. Even Yuna was impressed, and she's impossible to impress. Your family is wonderful, Hannah said. Intimidating, but wonderful. They stood in the entryway, the house suddenly feeling very empty and very quiet without Mia's presence. The awareness between them sharpened, became something almost tangible. Jean reached for her hand. Hannah, he said, his voice rough. We're alone. I know, she whispered. I don't want to assume anything. Don't want to pressure you. But He stopped, seemed to struggle for words. I want you. Have wanted you for weeks. But only if you want this too. Hannah's heart was racing. She thought about Tyler, about how he'd taken without asking, about how intimacy had become something she associated with fear and pain. She thought about how different Jean was, how careful, how he was giving her every chance to say no. I want this, she said clearly. I want you. Jin's eyes darkened. Are you sure? In answer, Hannah stepped closer and kissed him. Not tentative like before, but deeper, fuller, letting him feel her certainty. Jean responded immediately, his hands coming up to cradle her face, his mouth moving against hers with barely restrained hunger. But even in his desire, he was gentle, controlled, letting her set the pace. Bedroom? He murmured against her lips. Yes, she breathed. Jean led her to his room, their fingers intertwined. Inside, he turned to face her, his expression serious. We can stop anytime. If you get scared, if anything feels wrong, just tell me. The fact that he said it, that he cared enough to make sure she knew, made her want him even more. I trust you, she said. Jean kissed her again, backing her slowly toward the bed. His hands moved to the zipper of her dress, pausing for permission. She nodded, and he slid it down carefully, the dress pooling at her feet. You're beautiful, he said, his voice reverent as he looked at her. So beautiful. Hannah reached for his shirt, fumbling slightly with the buttons. Jean helped her, shrugging out of it, revealing the lean, muscled torso she'd imagined. There were scars there, faded but visible, reminders of the violence he'd seen. She traced one gently with her finger. Does it hurt? Not anymore, Jean said. Not when you touch me. They moved to the bed, skin against skin, and Jean took his time. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, like he was memorizing the taste of her. His hands explored with gentle reverence, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch. Tell me what you need, he murmured against her throat. Tell me what feels good. This, Hannah said, her fingers sliding into his hair. You. All of this. When he finally moved over her, his eyes locked on hers, he paused one more time. Are you sure? Yes, she said. Jean, please. I need you. He entered her slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of discomfort. But there was only pleasure, only the overwhelming rightness of being connected to him like this. He moved with deliberate control, keeping his weight mostly on his arms, making it about her pleasure rather than his own. Hannah had never experienced intimacy like this before. Tyler had been selfish, rough, focused only on his own satisfaction. But Jean seemed intent on learning her body, on making her feel cherished and desired and safe all at once. When pleasure built to a peak, Jean whispered her name like a prayer, and Hannah let herself fall, trusting him to catch her. He followed moments later, his face buried in her neck, her name on his lips. They lay tangled together afterward, Jin's arms wrapped around her, their breathing gradually slowing. Hannah felt tears on her cheeks and was surprised to realize she was crying. Did I hurt you? Jean asked immediately, pulling back to look at her with concern. No, Hannah said, laughing a little through the tears. The opposite. I didn't know it could be like that. Gentle and good and safe. Jean pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. It will always be like that with me. I promise. They talked in quiet voices, sharing more about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Jean told her about his plans to leave the dangerous side of his father's business, to focus on the legitimate enterprises. Hannah told him about wanting to finish her degree, maybe help other women in situations like hers. As the night deepened, they made love again, slower this time, more confident in their knowledge of each other. And when they finally slept, wrapped around each other, Hannah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete safety, complete trust, complete happiness. She should have known that feeling couldn't last. She woke to her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Jean stirred beside her as she reached for it, squinting at the screen in the pre-dawn light. Her blood turned to ice. 12 missed calls from the school administrator. 6 text messages from Tyler's sister, who Hannah hadn't spoken to in over a year. And 1 notification from the security app Mr. Huang had installed on her phone. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Perimeter breach on south side of property. Jean, she said urgently, shaking his shoulder. Jean, wake up. He came awake instantly. Years of military training evident in how quickly he oriented himself. What is it? Hannah showed him the phone. Jin's expression went hard, dangerous in a way she hadn't seen since that night at the restaurant. He grabbed his own phone, dialing his father. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Within minutes, the house was full of security personnel. Mr. Huang arrived with additional men, all of them armed and professional. They'd discovered surveillance equipment on the property, sophisticated enough that it had taken this long to detect. Someone had been watching them for days, maybe weeks. Nakamoto, Mr. Huang said grimly. They've been gathering intelligence. They know about Mississippi Park and her daughter. Hannah felt sick. She'd brought danger here, to Jean, to his family. But worse was the text from Tyler's sister. I told him where you are. I'm sorry, Hannah, but he threatened me. He's on his way to California. He says he's going to get Mia back no matter what. Both threats were converging. The Nakamoto syndicate that wanted to use Jin's vulnerability against his father. And Tyler, who'd finally tracked them down and was coming to take Mia. Jean pulled Hannah against his chest, his arms tight around her. Nothing is going to happen to you, or Mia, he said fiercely. I swear on my life, I will keep you both safe. But Hannah had heard promises before, and she knew that sometimes, no matter how much someone wanted to protect you, the danger still found a way in. She just held on to Jean and prayed that this time, this once, safety wasn't an illusion. That the man who'd held her so gently last night could be strong enough to face the violence coming their way. That love, for once in her life, would be enough to keep the darkness at bay. They moved to the safe house within 2 hours. It was a nondescript building in Koreatown, the kind of place that blended perfectly into the urban landscape. 3 stories, reinforced doors, security cameras covering every angle. Mr. Huang owned the entire building through a shell corporation, and the top floor had been converted into a fortress disguised as an ordinary apartment. Hannah packed their belongings in a daze while Jean coordinated with his father's security team. Mia, picked up from her sleepover by armed guards, seemed to sense the tension and stayed quiet, holding tight to Hannah's hand. The safe house was comfortable but sterile, all generic furniture and no personal touches. Jin's team swept it for surveillance devices before letting them enter. 6 men would be stationed in the building at all times, rotating shifts. No one in or out without authorization. Jean refused to leave them. His father had wanted him back at the main compound where he could be better protected, where he could help coordinate the response to Nakamoto's movements. But Jean stood firm. They're my responsibility, he told his father, his voice hard with determination. Hannah and Mia. I'm not leaving them with strangers, no matter how well trained. Mr. Huang had studied his son for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But you follow protocol. No unnecessary risks. That first night in the safe house, Mia couldn't sleep. She was frightened by the strange place and the serious men with guns standing guard. Hannah lay beside her in the unfamiliar bed, stroking her hair and singing softly until her daughter finally drifted off. When she emerged into the living area, she found Jean standing at the window, staring out at the street below despite the bulletproof glass, making it impossible to see clearly. His shoulders were rigid with tension. She should be in school, Hannah said quietly, coming to stand beside him. She should be playing with her friends and worrying about normal 4-year-old things, not hiding in a safe house. This will be over soon, Jean said, but his voice was tight. How can you know that? Jean turned to face her. His eyes were darker than usual, harder. Because I'm going to end it. Both threats. Tyler and Nakamoto. They want to use you to hurt me, to hurt my family. I won't let that happen. Hannah reached for his hand. Don't do something reckless. Don't let your need to protect me turn you into something you're not. You don't understand, Jean said. His hand tightened around hers almost painfully before he deliberately loosened his grip. I would become anything, do anything, to keep you safe. That's what loving someone means. Not like that, Hannah said firmly. I don't need you to become a monster for me. I just need you to be smart, to be careful, to stay alive. Jean pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I'm trying, he whispered. But I've never had something to lose before. Not like this. Not you and Mia. They held each other in the dimly lit safe house. Two people who'd both survived different kinds of violence, trying to figure out how to survive this new threat together. The call came 3 days later. Tyler had somehow gotten Hannah's new number, probably through his sister or some other connection she'd thought was severed. His voice on the phone made her entire body go cold. Hannah, he said, and he sounded calm, reasonable, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been angry. We need to talk about Mia. About custody. I'm her father. I have rights. You gave up those rights when you put your hands on her, Hannah said, her voice shaking despite her attempt at control. When you hurt me in front of her. When you made our home a place of fear. Jean was beside her instantly, one hand on her shoulder, his jaw clenched as he listened. I've changed, Tyler said. I've been in therapy. I'm sober now. I just want to see my daughter. That's not unreasonable. You're not getting near her, Hannah said. Then I'll have to take other measures, Tyler said, his voice hardening. I've made some friends here in LA. People who are very interested in your new boyfriend's family. They've been very helpful in explaining exactly who Jean Huang is. What kind of dangerous man you've led around my daughter. Hannah's blood ran cold. He'd contacted Nakamoto. Somehow Tyler had found them and made a deal. Meet me tomorrow, Tyler continued. Neutral location. Public place. We'll discuss this like civilized people. If you don't show up, well, my new friends have resources you can't imagine. They'll find you eventually. And when they do, I can't guarantee Mia's safety. Jean grabbed the phone from Hannah's hand. You threaten her or that little girl again, and I will end you, he said, his voice deadly calm. Tyler laughed, sharp and cruel. Tough talk from mommy's boy who has panic attacks in restaurants. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., MacArthur Park. Bring Hannah. Come alone or the deal's off and Nakamoto moves on your father's entire operation. The line went dead. Jean immediately called his father, relaying the conversation. Mr. Huang's response was swift and strategic. It's a trap, he said. Nakamoto is using this man to draw you out. They know you'll come if they threaten Mississippi Park. Then we spring the trap on them, Jean said. We go, but on our terms. Your men in position. We end this. Too dangerous, Mr. Huang argued. More dangerous to wait, Jean countered. They know where we are, or close enough. They're watching, gathering intelligence. Better to control when and where this happens. There was a long pause. Then Mr. Huang said, very well. But we do this properly. Full tactical support. You wear protection. And Mississippi Park doesn't go anywhere near the actual meeting point. No, Hannah said loudly enough for Mr. Huang to hear. I go. Tyler specified me. If I'm not there, he'll know something is wrong. Both Jean and his father started to argue, but Hannah cut them off. This is my fight too, she said. Tyler is my ex, my nightmare, my responsibility. I won't let other people handle him while I hide. And if I'm there, Mia stays here with your security team. She's safer that way. Jean looked like he wanted to lock her in the safe house himself, but she saw the moment he recognized her determination. Recognized that she needed this, needed to face Tyler herself rather than being protected from him. Fine, he said roughly. But you stay back. You don't get close to him. And you do exactly what I say. The next day arrived too quickly. Hannah left Mia with Mr. Huang's most trusted security personnel, including a kind older woman who promised to keep her daughter safe and entertained. Mia cried when Hannah left, sensing something was wrong, and it took everything in Hannah not to turn back. Jean had insisted she wear a bulletproof vest under her jacket. It was heavy and uncomfortable, but she understood the necessity. His own vest was visible, tactical gear that made him look every inch the soldier he'd once been. The drive to MacArthur Park was tense and silent. Mr. Huang had positioned his men throughout the area, coordinating with contacts in the LAPD to ensure law enforcement would be nearby, but not interfering unless necessary. Everything had been planned, rehearsed, prepared for. But Hannah still felt the cold fear in her gut as they approached the park. Tyler was waiting at a bench near the lake, exactly where he'd specified. He looked different than Hannah remembered. Thinner, harder, with the kind of wired energy that suggested he wasn't as sober as he'd claimed. He wasn't alone. 3 men in expensive suits stood nearby, watching with the kind of professional attention that marked them as Nakamoto's people. Jin's hand tightened on Hannah's arm. "Stay here," he said. "I'll handle this." But Tyler had seen her. His eyes locked onto Hannah, and something in his expression shifted, became possessive and angry all at once. "Hannah," he called. "Come here. We need to talk." Jean started to move forward, but suddenly there were more Nakamoto men appearing from the surrounding area. 6, 8, 10 of them, all positioning themselves strategically. This wasn't just about Tyler getting access to Mia. This was about Nakamoto making a statement. "Well," one of the suited men said in accented English, stepping forward. "Jean Huang, we've been wanting to meet you properly. Your father has been very difficult to reach lately." Jin's entire demeanor changed. He became someone else, someone harder and more dangerous than Hannah had ever seen. The protective gentleness vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "You made a mistake," Jean said quietly. "Using civilians to get to me. Your woman is hardly a civilian anymore," the man said. "She's living with you, sleeping in your bed, raising her child in your home. That makes her part of this world, part of your weakness." Tyler was moving toward Hannah now, and she realized with horror that this had been the plan all along. Use Tyler to distract Jean while Nakamoto's men made their move. Jean saw it too. He moved faster than Hannah could track, closing the distance between himself and Tyler, intercepting him before he could reach her. Tyler swung wildly, but Jean dodged easily, years of training evident in every movement. Then everything happened at once. Mr. Huang's security team revealed themselves, appearing from vehicles and buildings around the park. Nakamoto's men reached for weapons. Someone shouted, and Tyler, seeing his chance slipping away, lunged past Jean and grabbed Hannah. His arm locked around her throat from behind, squeezing. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, the world narrowing to the pressure on her windpipe and the familiar scent of Tyler's cologne that had once meant safety and now meant only terror. "Let her go," Jean said, and his voice was so cold it could have frozen fire. Tyler dragged Hannah backward. "Give me my daughter," he panted. "Give me Mia, or I'll kill her. I swear I will." Hannah clawed at his arm, trying to get air, trying to break free. But Tyler was stronger, always had been stronger, and the bulletproof vest that was supposed to protect her was making it harder to breathe with his arm crushing her throat. Jean raised his hand slowly, his eyes never leaving Tyler's face. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's talk about this. You want to see Mia? We can arrange that. Supervised visits. You can be part of her life." His voice was calm, reasonable, and Hannah recognized what he was doing. Talking Tyler down the same way she'd talked Jean down that night at the restaurant. Finding the humanity beneath the violence. Tyler's grip loosened slightly. "Really? You do that?" "Of course," Jean said, taking a step closer. "She's your daughter. I understand that. I understand wanting to be part of your child's life." Another step closer. "But you have to let Hannah go first. You're scaring her. And you don't want Mia to hear that you hurt her mother again, do you? That's not the father you want to be." "I'm not a bad father," Tyler said, and Hannah heard the desperation in his voice. "I'm not. I just need them to come home." "This can be your home too," Jean said softly. "LA, California. You can start over here, be near them, be part of their lives the right way. But first, you have to let her go." Tyler's arm loosened further, his attention completely on Jean now. Hannah felt the moment his focus shifted, the instant his grip became uncertain rather than iron. Jean moved. It was so fast Hannah barely saw it. One moment Jean was 3 feet away. The next he had Tyler's wrist locked in his hand, twisting it away from Hannah's throat. Tyler yelped in pain and released her. Hannah stumbled forward, gasping for air. Gene didn't let go. He spun Tyler around and took him down to the ground with practiced efficiency, one knee on his back. Tyler's arm twisted at an angle that made him cry out. "You ever touch her again," Gene said, his voice low and deadly, "and I will make you wish you'd never been born. Do you understand me?" Around them, Mr. Huang's security team had neutralized most of Nakamoto's men. The LAPD was arriving, sirens wailing, exactly as planned. The Nakamoto operative who'd been speaking earlier was being held by 3 of Mr. Huang's largest security personnel. It was over. The trap had been sprung, but not on Gene and his father. On Tyler and Nakamoto. Police officers swarmed the area. Tyler was arrested for attempted kidnapping and assault, the Nakamoto men for weapons violations and conspiracy. Mr. Huang had connections everywhere, and the entire confrontation had been recorded by his security team's cameras. Gene pulled Hannah into his arms as soon as the police took Tyler away in handcuffs. She was shaking, her throat bruised, her entire body trembling with delayed shock. "I've got you," Gene murmured against her hair. "You're safe. He can't hurt you anymore." Hannah clung to him, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of fear this time, but relief so profound it overwhelmed everything else. Later, after statements had been given and Tyler had been officially charged, after the Nakamoto Syndicate's operation in Los Angeles had been effectively dismantled through Mr. Huang's combination of legal pressure and strategic information sharing with law enforcement, Gene and Hannah returned to the safe house. Mia launched herself at Hannah the moment she walked in, wrapping her small arms around her mother's legs. Hannah picked her up, holding her tight, breathing in the sweet scent of her daughter's hair. Gene watched them, and when Hannah met his eyes over Mia's head, she saw everything he felt written clearly on his face. Love, relief, absolute devotion. After Mia was asleep that night, exhausted from the stress of the day, Gene pulled Hannah out onto the small balcony. The safe house didn't have an ocean view, but the city lights spread out before them like fallen stars. "I love you," Gene said without preamble. "I know it's fast. I know this whole situation is complicated and probably insane. But I love you, Hannah. I love Mia. I love the life we've started to build together." Hannah reached up to cup his face, feeling the tension in his jaw, the way his hands trembled slightly as they wrapped around her waist. "I love you too," she said. "You've given me something I thought I'd never have again. Safety, hope, the belief that not all men are like Tyler, that some men are gentle and good and worth trusting." Gene kissed her, deep and thorough, pouring everything he felt into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me," he said. "Not to the safe house. Not to some temporary arrangement. Home. To my house. To our house. You and Mia. Permanently." Hannah's heart felt too big for her chest. "Are you sure? This is a huge commitment." "I've never been more sure of anything," Gene said. "I want to wake up every morning with you beside me. I want to teach Mia to swim in the ocean and help her with homework and be whatever she needs me to be. I want to build a life with you, Hannah. A real life, not one defined by running or hiding or fear." "Yes," Hannah whispered. "Yes, I want that too." They held each other as the city hummed below them. Two people who'd been broken by violence finding healing in each other's arms. The danger wasn't completely over. Tyler would go to trial, and there would be legal battles ahead. The Nakamoto Syndicate might regroup, might try again someday. Life was never perfectly safe, never guaranteed. But standing on that balcony with Jin's arms around her, and their future spreading out before them like the city lights, Hannah finally believed that safety wasn't about the absence of danger. It was about having someone who would face that danger with you. Someone who would fight for you, stand beside you, love you even when the world felt overwhelming. It was about finding home in another person and knowing that together, you could survive anything. She'd found that in Gene, and she was never letting go. 1 week after the confrontation at MacArthur Park, they returned to the Malibu house. It felt different this time. The security was still present, guards at the gate and cameras monitoring the perimeter, but the oppressive weight of immediate danger had lifted. Tyler was in custody awaiting trial, facing charges that would keep him away for years. The Nakamoto Syndicate's Los Angeles operations had collapsed under the combined pressure of law enforcement and Mr. Huang's strategic interventions. A peace treaty had been negotiated, brokered by neutral parties, that established clear boundaries and consequences for future violations. Hannah walked through the house she'd fled just days ago and felt something settle in her chest. Not just relief, but recognition. This was home now. Not the tiny studio apartment where she'd hidden with Mia. Not her childhood home in Korea. This beautiful modern house overlooking the Pacific, where Jean taught her daughter about koi fish and made her coffee every morning and held her through nightmares. Mia raced through the rooms, reclaiming her space, checking on the fish, chattering excitedly about being back. She'd been remarkably resilient through everything, the way children sometimes were, bouncing back faster than adults could manage. Jean stood in the doorway to the deck, watching the ocean with an expression Hannah had learned to read. He was thinking, processing, working through something in that careful, analytical way he approached problems. She came up beside him, sliding her hand into his. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Jean turned to her, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes. "My father offered me a position, head of security operations for the legitimate businesses. No involvement in anything illegal, just protecting what we've built legally. It's what I've wanted for months, a way to use my training for something good." "That's wonderful," Hannah said. "Why do you look worried?" "Because it means staying in this world. Not as deep as before, but still connected to my family, to this life. And I need to know if that's okay with you. If you can accept being part of this family, with all that comes with it." Hannah thought about Soyoung's kindness, Yuna's fierce protectiveness, Mr. Huang's unexpected respect for her boundaries. She thought about the resources that had kept her and Mia safe when Tyler found them. The security that let Mia attend an excellent school without fear. "Your family saved us," she said. "Your father's people protected Mia when I couldn't. Your mother welcomed me like I belonged. I'm not afraid of your world anymore, Jean. I understand it better now. The gray areas, the complexity, and I trust you to navigate it with integrity." Jean pulled her close, his arms tight around her. "I don't deserve you. You deserve everything good," Hannah said firmly. "And I'm going to spend a very long time making sure you believe that." They spent the next few days settling back into routine. Jean started his new position, working from home office most days, coordinating security for his father's import-export businesses and real estate holdings. Hannah enrolled in online courses, starting to work toward finishing the degree she'd abandoned when she got pregnant with Mia. The nightmares still came sometimes, for both of them, but they were less frequent now, less intense, and they faced them together. 2 weeks after their return, on a Saturday evening when the sky was painted with the kind of sunset that made Hannah believe in magic, Jean asked her to take a walk on the beach. Mia was having dinner at the main house with Soyoung, who'd requested granddaughter time as she'd started calling it. The beach was private, part of the Huang property, and the security team maintained a discreet distance. Jean was nervous. Hannah could see it in the way he kept touching his pocket, in the tension in his shoulders. She waited, giving him space to find the words. They walked to a spot where smooth rocks created a natural seating area. The ocean rolled in gentle waves, the sound constant and soothing. Jean turned to face her, taking both her hands. "I've been thinking about how to do this," he said. "Practice speeches, rehearsed words. But everything sounds inadequate compared to what I actually feel." "Jean," Hannah started, her heart beginning to race. "Let me finish," he said with a small smile. "Please." She nodded, squeezing his hands. "You walked into the worst moment of my life and chose compassion over fear. You saw someone everyone else had given up on and decided I was worth saving. You brought light and laughter and purpose into a house that had been nothing but empty space. You taught me that strength isn't about violence or control. It's about choosing gentleness even when the world gives you every reason to be hard." His voice wavered slightly, emotion breaking through. "You and Mia, you've become my whole world. When I think about the future, I don't see it without you. I can't see it without you. You're in every plan, every dream, every moment I imagine." Jean released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. He dropped to one knee on the sand, and Hannah's breath caught. "Hannah Park, will you marry me? Will you let me be Mia's father, not just in her heart, but legally, officially? Will you build a life with me, here in this house, with my complicated family and our uncertain future? Will you trust me to love you and protect you and choose you?" every single day for the rest of our lives." He opened the box, revealing a ring that made Hannah's vision blur with tears. It was elegant but not ostentatious, a single diamond set in white gold with delicate Korean-inspired engraving along the band. Beautiful and meaningful, and so perfectly suited to her that she knew he'd put real thought into choosing it. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes. Yes to all of it." Jean stood and slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her while the sun set over the Pacific and the ocean sang its eternal song. When they finally pulled apart, both laughing and crying at once, Jean said, "There's one more thing. I already asked Mia. I asked if it would be okay if I became her dad for real. She said yes, but only if I promised to teach her to swim and let her name the next fish we get for the pond." Hannah laughed through her tears. "That sounds like Mia. I'm going to adopt her," Jean said. "If you'll let me. I want to give her my name, my protection, everything I have. I want her to never doubt that she's loved and wanted and safe." Hannah thought about her daughter's family tree project, about how easily Mia had accepted Jean as family, about the way she called for him when she had nightmares, the way she lit up when he came home from work. She would love that, Hannah said. We both would. The engagement dinner at the main house 3 days later was a celebration unlike anything Hannah had experienced. Soyeon cried happy tears and embraced her warmly, calling her daughter for the first time. Yuna surprised everyone by giving a toast about how her brother deserved happiness after everything he'd been through, and how Hannah had given him that. Mr. Huang stood and raised his glass. "To my son, who found his purpose. To Hannah, who saved him when no one else could. And to Mia, my future granddaughter. May their family know only joy from this day forward." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Mia, dressed in her favorite dress and sitting on Jin's lap, clapped enthusiastically even though she didn't fully understand what was happening. After dinner, Soyeon pulled Hannah aside. "I want you to have something," she said, reaching into her pocket. "This was my mother's, brought from Korea when she immigrated. I've been saving it for Jean to give to the woman he married." She pressed a delicate jade pendant into Hannah's hand, the stone a beautiful deep green that seemed to glow in the light. "I can't accept this," Hannah protested. "It's too precious." "Your family now," Soyeon said firmly. "And family shares what's precious. Besides, my mother would have loved you. She always said the strongest women are the ones who stay soft despite the world's cruelty." Hannah embraced her future mother-in-law, grateful beyond words for this acceptance, this love, this belonging. The months that followed were busy with wedding planning and legal proceedings. Jin's lawyers filed for Mia's adoption, beginning the process that would make him legally her father. Tyler's trial date was set, and Hannah had to give testimony, but Jean was beside her through every difficult moment. They decided on a small wedding, just family and close friends, overlooking the ocean at sunset. Hannah didn't want anything elaborate or showy. She wanted meaningful and intimate, the people who mattered most witnessing their commitment. 6 months after Jean had proposed, on a perfect October evening when the California sky was impossibly blue, Hannah married the man who'd changed her entire life. She wore a simple dress, cream-colored silk that flowed in the ocean breeze, with Soyeon's jade pendant at her throat. Mia was her flower girl, taking her duties very seriously as she scattered petals along the makeshift aisle they'd created on the sand. Jean stood waiting for her in a dark suit, his eyes bright with unshed tears as she walked toward him. His father stood beside him, pride evident in every line of his face. Yuna was Hannah's maid of honor, having insisted that she needed to make sure her brother didn't mess up his vows. The ceremony was conducted by a bilingual officiant who incorporated both Korean and American traditions. Jin's voice was steady as he recited his vows, promises to love and cherish and protect. Hannah's voice wavered but held as she made her own promises, to stand beside him through everything, to choose him every day, to build a life defined by hope instead of fear. When the officiant pronounced them married, Jean kissed her with such tenderness that Hannah felt her heart might burst. Behind them, the ocean crashed against the shore, constant and eternal, like the love they'd found in each other. The reception was held at the main house, a joyful celebration filled with laughter and dancing and toasts. Mia fell asleep on Jin's shoulder halfway through, exhausted from excitement. He carried her to a quiet room without complaint, settling her gently on a couch before returning to his bride. "Want to get some air?" Jean asked, holding out his hand. They slipped away from the party, walking down to the beach where they'd gotten engaged. The music and laughter from the house drifted down to them, but here they had privacy, space to breathe. "How does it feel?" Hannah asked, leaning against Jin's chest as his arms wrapped around her from behind. "Being married? Like coming home," Jean said. "Like everything before this was just preparation for finding you." They stood in silence for a while, watching the moonlight on the water, listening to the ocean's eternal rhythm. "I have something to tell you," Hannah said softly. Jean turned her in his arms to face him, concern flickering in his eyes. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," Hannah said, watching his face carefully. "I found out yesterday. I was going to wait until after the wedding to tell you, but I don't want to keep secrets. Not from you. Not ever." Jin's expression cycled through shock, disbelief, and then pure radiant joy. He dropped to his knees in the sand, pressing his face against her still flat stomach. "Really?" he whispered. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby," Hannah confirmed, running her fingers through his hair. Jean stood and picked her up, spinning her around while she laughed. "A baby," he kept repeating. "Our baby." When he finally set her down, both of them dizzy and grinning, he cupped her face in his hands. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. For seeing me when everyone else looked away. For trusting me with your heart and your daughter and now this new life. For choosing me." "Always," Hannah said. "I'll always choose you." They returned to the party hand in hand, the secret knowledge of their growing family warm between them. This wasn't the life Hannah had imagined when she fled Tyler with nothing but her daughter and a desperate hope for safety. She'd never dreamed she could feel this happy, this secure, this loved. But standing in Jin's childhood home, wearing his ring, carrying his child, watching him dance with Mia to make her giggle, Hannah understood something fundamental about survival and healing. Sometimes the worst moments of your life led you exactly where you needed to be. Sometimes choosing compassion over fear opened doors you didn't know existed. Sometimes the people who seemed most broken were actually the ones who understood healing best. Jean had been destroying a restaurant the night they met, lost in pain and rage and desperation. She'd been hiding from an abusive ex, terrified and alone, working herself to exhaustion just to survive. Now they were married, building a family, creating a life defined by love instead of fear. Hannah thought about that night at the restaurant, about the choice she'd made to approach Jean instead of running away, about how one moment of compassion had transformed everything. She thought about anyone who might hear their story, anyone facing their own impossible choices between fear and kindness. What would she tell them? That choosing compassion was always easy? That it never carried risk? No, she'd tell them the truth. That compassion was often the hardest choice, the scariest one. That extending kindness to someone in pain meant making yourself vulnerable. That there were no guarantees of safety or happy endings. But she'd also tell them that sometimes, just sometimes, choosing to see the humanity in someone's worst moment could change two lives instead of one. That healing was possible, even when it seemed impossible. That love could grow in the most unexpected places, if you were brave enough to let it. Later that night, after the guests had left and Mia was asleep in her room and the house was quiet, Jean and Hannah stood on their deck overlooking the ocean. The same spot where they'd shared their first kiss, where they'd opened their hearts to each other, where they'd built the foundation of this life they now shared. "Do you ever think about that night at the restaurant?" Jean asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Every day," Hannah admitted. "I think about how scared I was. How you looked so lost. How I almost walked away." "I'm glad you didn't," Jean said. "Me too," Hannah replied. "Me too." The ocean murmured below them, constant and eternal, carrying their story forward into a future bright with possibility. A future they would face together, with their daughters, with their family, with the unshakable certainty that they had found in each other something rare and precious and worth every risk. They had found home. They had found healing. They had found love. And it all began with a single choice to see past the chaos to the person underneath, to offer compassion when fear would have been easier, to believe that even in our darkest moments, we deserve to be met with kindness. That belief had saved them both, and it would guide them through everything that came next, whatever challenges the future held. because they were no longer alone in their pain. They were together, building something beautiful from the broken pieces, proving that sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is simply choosing to care when everyone else has given up. That was their story, their truth, their happily ever after, hard-won and real and absolutely perfect.